So I got another letter from my friend Neil, who I met at the Kansas City I Disciple National Conference through City Team Ministries. And he asked a question about what do we do with money in discovery groups. I get this question a lot because it's a big deal. A lot of people think, they think of church and they think of all of the finances that go with having a place-based church and accountants and all of that and people giving tithes and offerings. And then they think of the 501c3 status that we have in the United States that allows nonprofits to basically people to donate and get a tax write-off. And how does all that work with taxes and everything like that? Well, that's a great question. And to be honest, those are issues that are faced by larger groups. So these groups are starting out small. And the way that it works is in the discovery group, they're asked a question of, how can we take care of each other's needs? How can we meet the needs of people around us? And where money is an issue in how to meet those needs, then they'll give out money as appropriate, as the group can. And so you might think, okay, I've got a low-income group, and let's say somebody needs to buy a bus ticket, then to get to see their daughter's graduation. Well, one of the things that the group can do is each take a little bit of money and shell it out so they can go buy the bus ticket, and that is how they met needs. And then another thing is that they might sit there and say, okay, well, in order to help them get the bus ticket, we might host a garage sale and be able to sell some things and be able to help that brother or that sister make it to that event. And that's kind of how needs are met on the smaller scale. It's groups meeting each other's needs, and then groups looking outside of the group and start meeting needs in the community, and that's where the money goes. There doesn't need to be somebody doesn't need to be paid. Somebody doesn't need to have a building, and so the money doesn't go to those things. It actually goes straight out of the street, and it's not a problem. Now, as the group grows, they may decide that they're hitting a point where they want to have somebody who is a full-time minister. And the way we see to choose that is there somebody who is meeting the needs of the group now that if they weren't working a full-time job, they'd be able to meet the needs of the group later in terms of equipping and preparing the saints and taking care of them, perhaps playing a pastoral role in their lives. If that's the case, we actually tell them, okay, each of the group are responsible for paying that guy's salary, and you're not paying them to do pastoral work, you're actually paying them to not work their job so that they can better serve the body. Because you recognize that if they were released from having to work a full-time job, a 9-to-5 thing, then they would be able to serve the body better. And you're paying them to not work, because in many cases they might actually be able to work and make more for themselves and more for their family, but they've decided that, hey, this is a good arrangement in terms of, yes, I feel God has led me to meet these needs, and I want to meet them in this community. So the community chooses to pay them. In that case, you might want to set up a bit more of a formal system. That's possible, but you know what? That's years down the line. You don't have to address that up front. It's great, and you start small and don't worry about the big problems until they become now problems and things like that. Now, what do you do with money in 501c3? Well, here's the deal. You don't write it off, and that's okay. We don't have to get a tax write-off for all the money we're giving, and we're not talking about much money either. And it's usually going to meet immediate needs. Now, it's very, very interesting. In societies that are pretty wealthy, most American societies, we will often think that the first way to meet needs is by giving money. So if somebody has a toilet that's backed up, we might help them by paying for a plumber to go take care of their toilet, as opposed to in more blue-collar societies, in lower income areas, they would sit there and say, I'm going to go help my neighbor, and you would grab your plunger and you would walk over and you would help them plunge their toilet and get it free. And so they wouldn't have to contact a plumber because they have you. And so in many cases, sometimes that tithing, if you will, is of time, because that's what you have. Now people say, well, what about money in the storehouse and all that kind of stuff? And I say, well, you know what? The mandate in the New Testament was to be giving generously. Be generous givers. Not to follow the Old Testament law in terms of tithe. And yet we use tithe as a marker in many churches to help pay the cost of the budget for attending the place. And I get that. I understand that. And I'm not arguing whether you should do it or not. That's not the issue of this. But in terms of the small groups, you're going to find that they're going to give a lot more money because they're being taught to be generous givers the entire time they're being discipled into a relationship with Christ than if we were teaching them to be tithers to an organization. Not only that, the money in this case is not going to go for buildings and program. And I understand that because I run a building. I have one here that costs a lot of money, and so I understand what it costs, and I attend a church and I tithe to my church. But the reason I tithe to my church is because I understand that renting out the facilities and having staff that provide the needs and the things for my kids costs money. But these small groups, they don't have to have those things weighing them down, and as a result, when they're generous givers, then the money goes into the communities and into the neighborhood around them, and is the seed for often activities that help us engage lost people in meaningful conversations that lead to spiritual conversations that then result in invitations to Discovery Bible studies after finding persons of peace. And that's the kind of thing we want to see these small groups go. So in terms of money, I hope that answers the question, Neil. If you have a follow-up, shoot me back, and if I need to, I can shoot another video and address that question. So great question. Thanks for asking it.